Dave from the Common Sense Show, welcome to the program.
Hi, guys, and it's great to be on with you again. And yes, it's been an interesting week, and I did take my website down for 2.5 days while I contemplated my actions. I like to think of this as a strategic withdrawal. There's some things I can't talk about because it may be litigated, but let's just say financially I've been under attack, and there were clear and definitive threats issued against myself and my family. So, and these were specific enough that they weren't the run-of-the-mill, oh, I'll shoot you if I see you. These were very, very specific, and they knew things about the movements of myself and my family. And that's just why I took this very seriously. And this isn't the first time I've been down this road, but, excuse me, this is the first time I've been down this road on such a wide spectrum of attacks. When I was on with Jim Mars back in, July of 2009, in the last minute of the show, I was broadcasting from my home in the city. I typically live out in the country in my other home, and I had 8 shots fired over my house. It was witnessed by my sister-in-law in the side yard and my next-door neighbor, who was a two-tour of Vietnam veteran, and took the police 27 minutes in the city to respond to multiple shots fired. They even admitted they had dozens of calls. Jim was very concerned. He actually called me after the show, as did my news director, Annie DeRiso, and the police chalked it up in a later report that it was just fireworks from 3 blocks away, yet this was over 3 weeks after the 4th of July, and these weren't fireworks. These 2 people jumped out of a van, and they fired shots over. And you mentioned the Canamex Corridor and the North American Union. This is how I actually got involved in this. John McCain and his globalist forces through the CAFTA agreement, the Central American Free Trade Agreement, and they wanted to put a Canamex Corridor, which is the transportation arm of that agreement, through my area, and they were not paying us for eminent domain. They simply tried to force us off our land and use local government to do it. And I went on the warpath against McCain, exposed him. I started winning converts with our county commissioners and some of our state legislators, like Karen Johnson and Jack Harper, and they were instrumental in helping me. And we started to turn the tide of battle in 2009, and we got the Goldwater Institute, a public interest law firm, to take our case after everyone else had previously been afraid of McCain. And we filed suit, and that's when the shots happened. These incidences do not happen in isolation. And then about 4 months later, as we won the lawsuit because the other side backed down because they didn't want the public exposure of what I was going to bring into court, I'm driving home after coaching a college basketball game to my country home, and 2 gentlemen tried to run me off the road, and this went on for 11 minutes. It was all recorded in the Maricopa County 911 tapes, and the deputy sheriffs wouldn't do anything despite the fact I had a description, despite the fact that I drove to a fire station out here in the rural area where I live, and they witnessed some of this. And I went to the sheriff's headquarters. This is Sheriff Joe now, America's supposed toughest sheriff, to get a copy of the 911 tapes, and I was told they were missing. So this is my 3rd foray into being harassed in such a serious manner. But I did decide, because of the personal nature of the threats, and we are probably going to subpoena the phone records that my carrier will not provide now, because the phone call came in on my cell phone. And it specifically mentioned speaking about, quote, the children. Well, the only time I've talked about the children publicly in recent memory is about child sex trafficking. And I ran an article last August, and I said, this is coming. And I talked about how the CPS agents across the country have now become de facto federal agents because under Obamacare, there was a 110-page document that was written and commissioned by a group called the ICF, a UN think tank group. It was adopted by Catherine Sebelius of HHS, and it was the field manual in which dictated how CPS agents could operate and what leeway they had to go into homes and steal children. And if you don't mind, with your guys' permission, let me just give you a few examples, because none of you parents out there who have kids and none of your kids who have grandkids, your grandkids, they're not safe. And let me explain to you what I'm talking about. In the document, this 110-page document, CPS can come into your home for literally no reason at all. They can take your kids for what they call educational neglect. And this is the presence of bad grades on your kids' report cards. Yet I read this document from cover to cover. Nowhere in there does it say what a bad grade is. Now, in our family, if my son came home with a C, we'd consider that to be a bad grade in most situations. But they don't specify, so they leave it open-ended to the field agent to determine. They also have a violation of parental authority over children called isolation neglect. Isolation neglect is if you were to ground your child, prevent them from playing with their friends or being involved in social media, they call this isolation neglect, and it can take your kids. If you have beer in the home, they can take your kids. If you have a gun in the home, you're a registered gun owner, or if you're not, they can take your kid. There is no end to what they can do. If your child has missed 5 days of school in any 1 month, they can come in and say that's educational neglect and take your kid. So the CPS agents now are acting with extreme fervor. They have unbridled authority, and now they're working in concert with other state-run CPS agencies. And let me give you an example. One of the cases we're going to talk about tonight involves State Department employee with a security clearance, Monika Dylan, who got SWAT teamed, and then CPS came in and took her then 4-year-old boy last December. They couldn't prove anything against Monika. She had done nothing wrong. So and this is in Virginia, the Illinois CPS shows up at the parent's house demanding that her parents who live in Illinois sign a statement saying if you want to see your grandkid again, you will sign this statement that says that your daughter Monika abuses her son. So now we're seeing interagency cooperation because these CPS agents are now federalized. And if they're federalized, guys, there's nothing to protect them. Let me just give you a brief synopsis of what's happened to Monika's son. Monika's son is autistic. He's since turned 5, and CPS found an eczema patch on his neck. They didn't come into her house and SWAT team her with any specific allegations. They examined the boy, and they talked to him for 2.5 hours, and they found an eczema, dermatitis patch on his neck, and they said, oh, I see you strangle your child. And they used that as a justification to take the boy. Yet the police are right there, and if there was any really clear evidence that it happened, the police would have arrested Monika and taken her to jail. But no such allegations have ever been mentioned. Well, the boy was placed in a foster home, and unknown to CPS, the neighbors knew Monika, and she asked them to take the boy to a pediatrician to get an examination, and the pediatrician said there has been no abuse perpetrated against this boy. This is simply dermatitis or eczema. Monika tried to use this in her CPS proceedings, and they wouldn't even bother to look at the evidence from the pediatrician. The CPS agents of Virginia were so upset that they took away the boy from the first foster home and put the boy in a second foster home with 2 gay fathers. Now, this is a boy, now he turns 5. He's been potty trained for over 2 years. Normal boy, except for the fact he does have a disability and he has some spectrum of autism. Well, as the boy began to live more with these 2 fathers, he would run around when Monika would see him, moving his arms and sexual gesture motioning and saying, cut my arms off, cut my arms off. This 5-year-old who had been potty trained for over 2 years was now again wearing diapers and defecating in his pants. And Monika found evidence of a rash on his anus. I've seen the proof. The proof is so graphic, I don't dare put it on my website so as not to offend people, but I've seen the proof of this. So has CPS, so has the Fairfax Assistant County Attorney, Chris Sigler, and so has the local police department, and yet they take the boy away from Monika for no reason, and yet with these 2 fathers, they let this abuse continue. The boy is also mandated, because of his autism, to have occupational therapy paid by the state. And this is not happening. Monika is a Catholic, and CPS regulations mandate that the religious practices of the children will continue. This isn't happening. It's just one big pile of poo, yet this is going on all over the country. Since I first ran this story in the third week of May, I have heard from disaffected CPS agents all over the country, including in Virginia, and they said this is par for the course. Many of these foster children disappear, as Nick Bryant so eloquently wrote in the book called The Franklin Scandal, and this is how many children end up being sex trafficked. So I'm writing about this. Now, simultaneous to this, I'm also coming across information from some of my better insider sources that Ambassador Chris Stevens was not just gun running to al-Qaeda, he was supporting the gun-running operations designed to take out Gaddafi and Assad, and he was doing this with drug money. And then later allegations came up and said he was also involved in child sex trafficking. He was murdered 2 months before the election, and the smart money says Stevens had to be taken out, so this information didn't surface during the campaign. Now, these were the issues that I was focused on at the time that I got harassed and threatened. And the child sex trafficking was clearly mentioned to me in the threat and said, stop writing about the children or you're going to have to worry about your family. You know, here's the bottom line. Monika is a GS-9. She has no outside employment, and she's paid by the federal government. So why in the world would the IRS have to audit someone like this? They already know where the money's coming in from, and easy to find out where the money's going out to. So I don't know why they'd have to audit her. But the IRS is also the enforcement agent for Obamacare, and Obamacare now monitors child welfare through control of HHS and ultimately CPS. So it makes sense to me that the IRS was involved. But it wasn't just that. As you said, Sheila, she started being drug tested. Now, she's been a 9-year employee. There's been no change in her work habits and her work performance. Why would you all of a sudden start drug testing someone? Because you're harassing her. Well, this is what I've discovered. Monika had some social interactions with a gentleman who was writing to Congressman Frank Wolf of the 10th Congressional District in Virginia. And this is actually, some of this is in my story in terms of the fact that Congressman Wolf has now admitted there's child sex trafficking in Fairfax County, Virginia, where Monika lives. This is on his congressional website, and I copied and pasted it and put quote marks around it word for word this morning. What I didn't reveal in this article, and I'm saving it up for later salvos against CPS, is that Congressman Wolf had an insider source who Monika knew socially. Her boy was friends with this man's daughter, and he was putting out prolific amounts of information about child sex trafficking to congressmen, including Congressman Wolf, and he died under very, very mysterious circumstances, and that's when the harassment of Monika started. So she doesn't know anything about the sex trafficking. She was not my source. But that doesn't mean the other side, the bad guys, didn't consider her to be an operational leak. And when you add to the fact that she works in a liberal organization and she has an NRA bumper sticker on her car and she's a practicing Catholic, she would be perfect whistleblower material, and I can see why she was targeted. And then when I tell this story, people say, well, why would the Virginia CPS agree to do this dirty work for the federal government and purge a federal employee that they feel is going to be a security leak? Well, here's why. When her son Dylan was taken, the Virginia CPS receives a $5,000 remuneration. And Monika's ex-husband's last name was Rodriguez. And so the boy carries the father's name, so he's designated as being Hispanic, in other words, a minority, and that brings more cash payment from the feds. And because the boy has a disorder, a disability called autism, that's even worth more money for remuneration from the feds.